Hey guys, welcome to My Line of Work. My name is Luis Chavez. This channel, we just dive deep into the world of work, what people do, why they do it, and how they got there. Today we have a special guest, Michael Mancha. He works for a nonprofit, and so we're going to dive deep into what nonprofits do and what that is. It's a little bit different than maybe, or we'll find out how different it is. We'll let him talk. I don't want to assume it's too different, but we'll get into it. And thanks for coming, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
you being here. So just if you want to just explain your role at the nonprofit, maybe what your typical day looks like.
Yeah, nonprofits are different. They span a different scope of things, from conservation to education, political things, different, all kinds of stuff. Where I work at is an education-based nonprofit, so everything that we do is for the education world, schools, students. That's all where it's all focused. And I work in development, which is just another way of saying fundraising. So development in the nonprofit side would just be those that raise money, host events, do things that are the very public-facing part of the nonprofit. So it kind of enraptures all of the fundraising, the marketing, the promotion, the public relations. It's called kind of in one group.
Yeah.
And what I do is a lot of different things. Like I do a lot of marketing and communications, and that can be anything from like email blasts and newsletters and social media and all that kind of contact, to the communication side, which is if we have events, I might write scripts. We might create content. We might develop messaging, things like that. But then I also work on the actual fundraising side. So I work primarily with like corporate donors and foundation donors. The difference between that would just be if you own a company and you're a corporation. A foundation might just be an organization that's set up to give money on behalf of whatever. Yeah. A lot of companies, they have foundation sides, and so they'll give money through those areas. And so we just kind of manage those clients. We reach out for new clients. We try to get new people, new types of donors in the donor base. And then we also have events. So we have like fundraising events. We have different things where those donor bases and those supporters can come and just kind of engage with what we do. And that helps the money side, that helps the engagement side of why people would give to a nonprofit in the first place. So, yeah.
Very cool. All right, so let's go back. Is this something you always wanted to do? Is this something you specifically went to school for? How did that? How is it as early as you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of both, because I went to school for communications. So primarily it was journalism, but mass communications is what, and a lot of people go to college for communications, and it can turn into a bunch of different things. Yeah. You can work in the public relations world. You can work in the marketing world. Yeah. You can write. I mean, you can do a lot of different things with communications. And most of my career was as a designer, a graphic designer. I worked in marketing and branding. So I have a lot of years of experience of understanding a brand and understanding how brands work and how to communicate and sell and market those brands. Yeah. And so I've worked in all kinds of levels, from like working for marketing firms where we have clients that we market, and then working in internal marketing departments for a company where it was our job to do the marketing communications for that company. And then I grew into doing a lot more on the communication side. So a lot more writing, content creation, and a lot more of the outwardly facing stuff. And then I went to just being involved in a church, which are technically nonprofits. Yeah. I kind of wanted to move away from working in the corporate world, which is obviously very profit driven. It's very product driven. Yeah. To the nonprofit space, which is mission driven, right? Okay. So the purpose for what we do and everything that we do is driven by a mission rather than a product, or rather than a bottom line, a dollar, profit. So it's not really something that I've always wanted to do, but it does fit into, I think, a skill set that I have to offer, and then it aligns in the way that choosing to be like mission driven in a career. You're working towards something, and you still have a business side, but you're working more towards something meaningful, and that kind of fulfills a different part of you, makes working and the mission that you have for it a little bit different. So it's kind of both. I mean, the skills that I have over my career I definitely use them every day in my job. But I never imagined really like working for a nonprofit, Yeah.
Very cool. So what skills, you talked about skills, what skills or experiences are essential for someone in your position specifically?
Communication skills, because a lot of what I do is talking to people. Right. It's whether we're talking directly to donors, fundraising event, or just the ability to communicate a message. Like that's that main essence of what we do. Like if you had to narrow it down to what we do, it's just storytelling. Right.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of how that kind of plays out in that being able to communicate a message or tell a story. So if I'm creating social media content, there's a story that I have to tell a story, right? If I'm creating, if we have an event and I'm writing a script, I'm writing someone's speech, that has to tell a story. But it can also be very like nuts and bolts, where if we're applying for a grant, say we're applying to an organization for a high dollar amount of money, and we're asking them for that money, we have to, in that grant application, we got to tell a story. Like we have to tell the reason why we do what we do, and what we want, and what we're looking for, and why this matters. So it's all about storytelling, right? Everything that we do is about storytelling. So I think that's the biggest skill in working in kind of what I do, is just the ability to communicate and communicate well. And it's, marketing is a lot of like, selling. I mean, there's a selling aspect, there's a promotion aspect to what you do, but really it is about storytelling and how well you tell that story. Can you tell a convincing enough story to where people not only know your story, but they want to be a part of it? That's the biggest part.
The buy-in.
The buy-in, because you can tell a story of what you do and be like, man, that's good. Good for you. It's really great what you're doing. But to tell a story where people are like, man, I'm moved by what you do, and I want to be a part of what you do.
Very cool. And is that something that is taught in college, part of your communication degree, or is that something that you learned, or both, a little bit of both?
It's both. I mean, you definitely get in college, you get the skills to understand how to build a story, because there's a craft to it. Just like anything else. It would be like saying, if you enjoy cooking, right? Going to culinary school is not going to hurt you, because you're going to understand how different ingredients work and why they work and why they're necessary, versus just having a passion for cooking, right? You have to understand, it's almost a science behind cooking, and it's the same for storytelling. There's an art and even a science to how to tell a story, and what grabs people, what moves people. And when you have those elements, you learn those elements. But just like anything else, I mean, if you're not putting them into practice, so it takes a lot of practice. It takes, that's why you see a lot of people that go to school for communications or marketing. They start off in roles like social media or writing newsletters, because they're learning the art of storytelling, versus getting up to a place where you are in public relations, where you're talking to the news, or you are the public face of a company. You're still doing the same thing, but you have way more experience in how to like do it quickly and tell that story in 2-3 minutes, or over a long period of time that you have to tell it.
And you kind of mentioned that your journey was, you worked in the private sector before you worked in the nonprofit. Is that something you recommend someone that's looking to work at a nonprofit? Would that experience, obviously it wouldn't hurt them, but would you say, get experience and then do nonprofit, or jump right in, or does it matter?
I don't think it really matters, because I think what you're doing in the private sector is, you are very, it's not a bad thing, but you are very like product based or something that. So, for example, where I worked at, I guess in the private sector,
Yeah.
where I worked in an internal marketing department, the company that I worked for was like a sports therapy,
Mhm.
right? And I don't know anything about sports therapy. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist,
Yeah.
but it takes you have to sort of learn what this is, right?
Yeah.
And then once you learn it, then you're really building the ability to sell it, to tell that story
Yeah.
of why this is effective,
Yeah.
and then communicate that messaging and using people's stories to communicate that back. There's always a story in everywhere. Like even if you work in the private sector for something that might be just sort of seems mundane,
Yeah.
like there's always a story that you're selling, because there's never going to be a period where hardly anything just kind of sells itself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to inform people of why they want this, especially if it's something that in the private sector you're choosing to spend your money, right?
Yeah.
So if you work, if you are in your profession as a inspector, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's other inspectors.
Yeah.
Why do I go to you?
Yeah.
Right? Is it because you do a good job? Well, how do I know you do a good job? Is it
Yeah.
because of what you offer, or what
Yeah.
type of missions and values you have? Well, how do I know what those are? It
Yeah.
depends on the story you tell me,
Okay.
right? And so there's a story to tell anywhere. So
Yeah.
I think it just matters of like where your heart is at. Like if
Mhm.
you want to get that experience, to be honest, you're probably going to find more opportunity in the
Mhm.
private sector, because
Okay.
there's more money, there's more jobs to offer.
Yeah.
Where in nonprofit, it's not the same. So
Yeah.
you might have a little bit more trouble sort of finding those spots,
Yeah.
where it might be easier to do that in the public sector or private sector.
Yeah. And then, so what challenges do you face in the not-for-profit sector?
The biggest thing is finance,
Okay.
money, right? Because obviously that it's a nonprofit, so the money doesn't come from selling anything.
Yeah.
We're not selling any product, right? So when you have a company that has a high level of profit,
Mhm.
and so they can literally just pour money into
Yeah.
your marketing budget or your communications budget,
Yeah.
and so you have a lot of freedom to create and like a wide variety of opportunities to tell stories. You can
Yeah.
and you can employ any level of expertise to tell those stories.
Yeah.
But when you have in the nonprofit sector, obviously it's all private revenue. It's all what the development team is bringing in,
Yeah.
and that determines what you're able to do. And so, in some ways, it's a challenge, because you don't have the resources that you would if you worked, say, for a bigger company.
Yeah.
But you're going to definitely have the challenge, because you still have to tell the same story, right? You still have to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah.
You just have less resources to do it in. And so you have to be creative
Yeah.
in how you work that. So it might be better for you in the long run, because it does push your creativity or resourcefulness to a level that you might not necessarily have if you go work for a company and you've got a marketing team, a creative team of 10, 20 people, and you can create things pretty simply, pretty easily.
Yeah. So how big is a team that you work with?
It's just two of us. Where I work at is two. It's a small staff.
Okay.
We have 11 people on our staff at the organization that I work for.
Yeah.
Some are bigger, obviously. Our organization is local, so it's not a huge organization. Say, for example, like the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA.
Yeah.
We have this huge sort of national brand.
Yeah.
Our organization is national, but it's still, we're like a local team.
Yeah.
And so it's just two of us.
Wow.
And so the two of us are responsible for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And
but primarily your focus is getting the funding.
That's our primary focus. Yeah.
Okay.
Is earning funding. Yeah.
Yeah. And does it fluctuate, or like your funding? Or is it pretty consistent?
I mean, that depends on the nonprofit that you work for. Where I work specifically, we have 3 areas of funding, and so one of the 3 areas of funding, our third of the pie, I guess, is what we would call private revenue, which is what we're responsible for bringing in.
Okay.
So that comes from like corporate foundation funding, individuals giving. Another piece of the pie is a different funding source, and then another piece of pie is another funding source.
Okay.
But those can fluctuate too, right?
Yeah.
It determines the places that we're plugged into, the partnerships that we have. Are they able to provide the funding that's necessary?
Yeah.
And if not, then we kind of have to make the decision of, do we cut certain things that we're doing, or do we keep those programs and then just absorb that into private revenue, which raises our goals, our annual goals.
Yeah.
And then if, so we make that collective decision, then we just have that responsibility to do that.
Yeah. And then does the team kind of know, because I know you're in it, right, as far as trying to get funding, do all 11 people kind of know what's coming in? And
to a degree, I think there's a side where I don't want to say it's not their job, but it's not really, it's not going to really help them to know the details.
Yeah.
But we are pretty as transparent as we can, because in reality, for almost any nonprofit, that funding is what allows everyone else to do their job.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can't secure funding for whatever reason, then that affects their ability to be able to do the work they're doing. Yeah. And like I said before, nonprofits being sort of mission driven, there's like that goal that we're all working for. And some people in the organization might be a little bit more closer to that thing, so like us being education based, we have people on our team that are in the schools, right? Yeah. And so they're right there. And as a development team, we're not in the schools just like they are. But in order for them to do that, we have to do our job. Yeah. So we're very public. We celebrate wins as a team, like as a whole organization. Yeah. We celebrate donor wins or grants that we might receive. We celebrate them together because it means just as much for them as it does for us as accomplishing it.
Yeah. What about, are there things that responsibilities you have or tasks that you are responsible for outside of your training or job description? Like how flexible do you have to be as far as, like, I was hired to do this, but they're also asking me to do other things?
Well, like I said, because nonprofit work is usually small teams, a small number of people doing a big job, you're going to have a level of flexibility, because when I came in to work for this organization, it was strictly doing like basically my skill set of like marketing and communications, and then sort of the need expands to saying like they need me to do more fundraising, like more outwardly facing fundraising. Yeah. And so first year or so that I was at the organization, I didn't visit clients. I didn't go to client meetings or donor meetings. I just did the work. And I would label myself what I call at that time to be like fundraising adjacent. So like I worked with all the people that did the fundraising, and I supported them in a lot of the work that I did, but I was never like in it. Yeah. And then, over time that role changed, and I moved into different positions where now I am in all of these donor meetings, and I am going to all of these organizations and corporations and meeting with people and telling that story right there. Yeah. So there's that flexibility of like, can you grow where you're needed to grow? But then there's also, I think, a level where you have to, because again, it is mission driven. Like you really need to understand what like everything is, right? So those, like I said, who work on the side of the organization that is directly in the schools and they're directly in the work there, it really greatly benefits for them to understand how the funding works, right? And in the reverse way, like I can't tell the story unless I understand how they do that work, even though I don't do any of it. Yeah. If I don't understand what they do and how they do it and what their models are and what their data looks like and what their I have to understand that in order to properly tell the story. Yeah. In order to me to properly say when someone, if I meet with a high level donor and they were like, "What does city or what do they do? How do they work?" And I go,
Yeah.
"Well, they this and that," and I can't be like, "Oh, it's like this,
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom." Then they're like, "Well, you don't really know what,
Yeah.
right?" So you have to be willing to do your job, grow where there is room to grow and
Yeah.
needed to grow, but then also be open to understanding
Yeah.
all of it,
Yeah.
because then that's the only way you can really be successful, I think, in a role like that.
Yeah. And then are there certain degrees or avenues of education that would, kind of empower someone to work in the nonprofit sector? Are there
Yeah,
certain degrees that
definitely.
are like, if you study these things, nonprofits need these kind of professionals,
Yeah, I mean, I think I
aside from
definitely,
marketing?
because you definitely are going to go to school for something like marketing,
Yeah.
communications.
Hmm.
Those have a different. I mean, they can mean different things to different organizations,
Yeah.
but you're going to learn the skills that you need in marketing and communications. I mean, nonprofits, they still have operations.
Yeah.
So having degrees or even like certifications in project management,
Okay.
HR,
Yeah.
like having business acumen and
Yeah.
or even business degrees and understanding that
You
you're
have an
going to need to,
accountant, like
yeah,
finances.
understanding finance.
So,
Um, our site, which is small, but again, we're a part of a national organization,
hmm.
which is still a nonprofit. And in that national organization, they all have a finance team, account payable team, HR, development,
Yeah.
marketing, creative, and they have just the same executive level people,
Okay.
and so any type of degrees in terms of business or public affairs.
Yeah.
Some nonprofits, ours isn't, but some nonprofits have a very like government and political advocacy arm to
Hmm.
them. So they have areas of the nonprofit that are in with city council
Yeah.
and county commissioners, and they're there at Congress, and they go to Washington, they go to
Oh,
Austin or
okay.
whatever. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, even having those political science degrees, like understanding how politics works,
Yeah.
you can take those and go to work for a nonprofit that is specifically a nonprofit that works in and has political advocacy,
Yeah.
whether it be education or healthcare or, conservation,
Yeah.
for, parks and national parks and things like that. Like all of those are nonprofit run, and some of them
Okay.
have level of political advocacy. And so, yeah, political science
Yeah.
degrees, public affairs, public relations. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that can go into. Yeah.
So where did you specifically hear about your nonprofit? Like, did you go to like a website, or where was it promoted that
Yeah.
you like, hey, oh,
I
hey, I'm gonna
mean,
apply for that?
in all honesty, just it was LinkedIn. Like,
Okay.
yeah, like I was looking for work,
Hmm.
wanted to get into the nonprofit world, and felt like that was kind of what I wanted to explore. And so, yeah, I just literally was on LinkedIn, just looking
Nice.
for different roles,
Yeah.
and I came across it, and I'd never heard of it before, and so applied for it. But then I read everything about it,
Yeah.
did the research, and really kind of just was like, I really like their mission, their what they were about,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do that work. And so, yeah, just LinkedIn. But I mean, um, one of the things that we do as a nonprofit is we do a lot of recruitment,
Hmm.
and that happens in universities, that happens in sometimes
Oh,
in
okay.
schools and high
Yeah.
schools. And so, um, even just paying attention to those things when they go to a university,
Yeah.
or they go to something, those kinds of fairs, and paying
Yeah.
attention to those tables and like learning about them, like they can really inform you on the work that they do.
Yeah.
And then it can, especially if you're in college and you're looking for where the next step is, you can see those organizations and you can see that how you're working there and whatever it is you're studying could fit into
Yeah.
that place. So you can definitely find a lot of information about nonprofits and those types of
Yeah.
recruitment fairs, career fairs, because we do that, and I know a lot of nonprofits that do that.
Yeah.
You know, um,
Okay.
But yeah.
What if I'm not, college isn't for me, and I'm like, I just want to go straight from high school to nonprofit? Are there opportunities?
I think it depends on what you're doing
Okay.
and how you are working.
Yeah.
Us particularly, the nonprofit that I work for, we some of our staff come through a volunteer program,
Okay.
and so you can apply through there and be a part of it, and then that might lead after that time. It's not really an internship. It's like a step above that, but
Okay.
even working internships
Mm-hmm.
with nonprofits can like get you in the door,
Yeah.
and then there's a staff position that can be available to you.
Yeah.
But nonprofit work, I think, is not while it can seem kind of like homegrown, organic. It's not the big corporate world. It still has a lot of necessary aspects,
Yeah.
necessary things that would require degrees or certifications or things like that. And so there's ways to get into. Again, it depends on the nonprofit. It depends on there might be steps in some nonprofits where you can come in as a volunteer, you can come in as a part-time, you can come in things like that and kind of build that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it just depends on the nonprofit you're looking at.
What advice would you give someone interested in working in the nonprofit sector?
Whatever it is that your specialty is. So say for example, like myself, it's if it is marketing communications, then just work at building your ability to do the things that would be required in a nonprofit space, right? And it whether that be like there is going to be a lot of fundraising. Normally, if you're going in a nonprofit and you work in some sort of marketing or communication, you're going to probably be somewhere in the fundraising space, right?
Okay.
So I would educate yourself the difference between working for a nonprofit versus a corporate in the corporate world, because there are a lot of big differences, and so other advice I would give is the nonprofit world is not as lucrative. You know what I mean? Like you're not. It's like there's a lot of nonprofit jobs that are really really good, but because they are mission based, and because it is nonprofit and it's privately funded, like sometimes the differences in pay are going to be pretty noticeable. So if you go to work for a marketing firm, or if let's say you work in HR, and you go to work in HR for a company versus a nonprofit, you're probably going to make more working for in the private sector. That's just the reality. And so, but a lot of the people that I work with, a lot of the people that are other nonprofits that we work adjacent to, like those people are some of the best individuals, because what they're doing is like they're doing it for what they love. So that's, I guess, another piece of advice is that if you want to go to a nonprofit work, go to work in the sector that you are passionate about. So if you're passionate about education, go to work for an education nonprofit. If you're passionate about political advocacy, like go to work for a political advocacy group. If you're passionate about healthcare, if you're passionate about the community, the homeless, the underserved, families, kids, mothers, babies, like pregnancy, like there's all sorts of if that's what you're passionate about, like go into those places, because there is a level of heart that is going to be required to like.
And
really
then knowing that the income may not be the same, are there benefits in the nonprofit that you're like that you've noticed? Like, okay, the money, maybe I'm not making as much as I can over here, but I've noticed these things that are beneficial.
I think it does depend, because like where I work at, there's other benefits that we get, like literal tangible benefits, whether that's like time off or different things that we're a part of. But working in the nonprofit space, people make the decision to go do that mainly because of what they believe in. Like, no, I mean, you might get a nonprofit job because it was a job that was available to you. But I would say that 95% of the people that I work with and that I meet that also work in nonprofit work, they're doing it because they're doing something that they believe in. And so I think a lot of that is the intangible benefit that you find. You can get a corporate job. Let's say you work and you're really passionate about sports. You might go work for a sports company, or you might go work for an outdoor, whatever might work in healthcare or wherever you're working at, and you really believe in what you're doing, which happens all the time. But I think it's a little bit more in nonprofit work. There's an intangible reward of like what I'm doing, And for me, like I said, working in the development side of what we do, we don't get to see the in-school work with the students and with our folks, but I do get those opportunities to like sometimes be engaged in that manner. And sometimes those are like the best days because I'm like, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Like this right here, like this is why this matters. And so all of the corporate meetings that I have and all the proposals I have to write and grants that we apply for and all the finances that we're tracking, that sort of day to day, like when you get that opportunity to like really be right into the mission of what you're doing, you're like, all right, this is why it makes sense. Why I do, right? Because I love seeing this. And if what I do allows this to continue, then let's go. We'll keep doing it.
Cool, man. Yeah, I understand that. I taught when I was a teacher. I taught fourth grade for a long time, and a lot of it was, especially the school where I was, there was a lot of pressure to prepare the kids for the STAR and they do well in the state assessment. And in fourth grade they take 3 assessments: the reading, writing, and math. And so it's just a lot of prep. And one year I got moved from fourth grade to kinder, and I had never done kinder. I thought I was going to hate it. I'm like, man, in fourth grade, they're very independent and, they're at a certain age. I was comfortable, right? I don't know what idea I had of kinder, but I get to kinder, and my first year in, I just loved it because you could see that growth, right? So they come in and they don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to count. They're very, very just
moldable.
Moldable, very fresh. And then at the end of the year, they're reading and they're writing and they're just counting and math, and it's just, the growth is insane. I was doing the same thing and I was making the same amount of money, but kinder was just like, I loved it. I loved kinder. And so if I ever go back to teaching, I'm going to be picky and I'm going to tell them,
I want to do kinder.
I'll do kinder. If it's not kinder, I'm not coming back.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about nonprofit work is, while it may be difficult in some aspects, it may be difficult. It being mission driven like that, I think, is what is really what makes a difference. Is because there's, the more that you do for whatever your role is in a nonprofit space, whatever your role is, if you're working for a good nonprofit, then you'll always kind of be locked into what that mission is, right? And if you lose sight of it, or if you're sort of very distant from it, then it can become very tedious. And then you start thinking about the compensation and you're like, man, this isn't measuring up. So anybody who would work in a nonprofit space, I think that's super important, is understanding, like, does this nonprofit really believe in its mission, and is it really working towards that mission? And if it's a good nonprofit where they're really doing that, then you're always gonna kind of know what the mission is. You're gonna, that machine is gonna keep driving. It's gonna keep going forward. There's a lot of people in that space where the mission is very vague. They're not always going. There's a term actually that I learned recently. I never heard it before, but it's called, the word is, or the phrase is, mission creep. And I didn't know what that meant. I was in a meeting and people were saying that. And in the chat, I was like, what is this word y'all keep using? And it was mission creep. And it's basically when you have an organization that starts to do things that are not really aligned with its mission, kind of, but they're sort of like creeping away from the mission, mainly because they're trying to just get more money, right? So it's like, oh, we're doing this program over here now. We're gonna start this new initiative, and it does this because these people are gonna fund it, and they're gonna give money towards it. We're gonna start doing it, and then you look at the mission, and you're like, that's not really what we do. Like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
And you start to ask those questions, and that can happen in reality because it's hard. It's hard to secure funding sometimes. And if you've got an organization or you got a foundation that's like, hey, we really want to give you money, but we're not really about education in the sense of like math and science and getting test scores and preparing for college and raising graduation rates. Like we're more about like youth education and like at like sports in school.
Yeah.
And so like, can y'all, and if you start like leaning over here, but yeah, we can do something in sports, then you're just like, right.
Yeah.
And that can happen. Right. And so I think just a good nonprofit is going to be sort of always mission driven and mission critical in terms of like, this is what we're doing. And if we're not aiming just towards this goal, then we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that is where, when you find an organization that does that and stays aligned to that, then you're always going to feel sort of that intangible, but a reward, a reward nonetheless, that like what we're doing is important.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's a good life lesson, right?
Yeah.
To stick to your values and, you know, this is the type of person I am. These are the choices that I make. And anything outside of that, you know, can make me money or can bring me quick success. Quick success, but you know.
Yeah.
What qualities do you think are essential for someone to succeed in a nonprofit? Kind of leaning on that, right? Like values and what would you say?
I think it's whatever it is that organization is about, whatever their mission is. Like if that is a strong value in you, right? So what you're doing is like, when I lived in Oregon, there was an organization that we were a part of. As a church, we were really tied to this organization, and they were what you would call a gap. I forget what it's called now, but so basically, when you had people who were sort of transitioning from maybe a non-livable space, say for example, it was a couple and they were going to take in some foster kids, but they didn't have what they needed. They didn't have kids, and then they were fostering kids. So this organization provided those resources. It was called Love for Lane County. That was where we worked at, or where we lived in Lane County, and basically they just had this giant warehouse of like beds and sofas and blankets and housewares and clothes, and sometimes. And so when people were transitioning from maybe homelessness to their first home, when people were transitioning out of prison into a home, or when they were taking in foster kids or something, and they just needed stuff, right? This organization you could come here and you could get a bed and bedding and blankets and pillows and stuff and a dresser for this room for this kid you might be taking in, or maybe you're transitioning out of living in a shelter and, you know, women's shelter, and now you finally got an apartment and you need a bed or you need dishes for your house. Right? All that to say that when like you understand, like when that value, you're just like, man, it was really hard to to serve that organization and not just be like, man, my heart burst open for all these people. Like that just need simple things. That in my house, I've got a closet full of blankets that are just extra blankets. And you're just like, man, I don't realize how much of a need this is. And so you then just are like pouring out to it. Right. But then there was other organizations that did very similar types of work all over the city. But you know, they just, maybe it's not that your values don't align. It's just, that's just not where your heart was into. Right. And I think that's something that nonprofit work sometimes misses in an attempt to hire good people or bring the right people on staff. Like you really got to find those people to be like, do you really, you know, care about this? Like we serve XYZ.
Yeah.
This is our community. Like, do you really care about them?
Yeah.
And this is what you really aim for.
Yeah.
Right. And can you demonstrate why you care so much about that? And some of the people you find are like are very much into it. And so you as a sort of trying to understand, do I want to be in nonprofit work?
Yeah.
You really have to ask yourself that question. Like, how there's a difference, I think, in like, oh, I like what they do and I believe in what they do. That's like something that was told to me a long time ago.
Yeah.
Was like, you have to put yourself in places with people and alongside people that you don't just believe in each other, because your mom believes in you, right? Everything you do, your mom, you can do it. She believes in you, right? But it's not necessarily about belief. It's about shared vision. It's about shared value. Because if in the process your values get tested, if we share them, my values get tested. You know, if your vision gets tested, our vision gets tested. If your mission gets tested, our mission gets tested. But if I just believe in your vision and mission, well, when that gets tested, I might be like, well, I might go over there then.
Yeah.
Because this is struggling. But if we share that, then we're like, no, we're going to get in and fight together. Right. And so I think it's those things that are sort of intangible, that you're just like, if you really believe in education, if you really believe in political advocacy, if you really believe in like crisis pregnancy or something that, homelessness, and you just really believe in that, then look to those organizations and say, like, I want to put my heart into that. You know, I think that's the biggest thing is it's not just like about, because look, as a person who has, over a decade of experience in marketing and branding and things like that, right? I'm not super passionate about home inspection, but I can help you tell an amazing story. Like, I can help you get to where you need to be, right? Because I have the skill to do that. So if you have the skill for people, HR, finance, you can go anywhere and use those skills. Right? But the values, the qualities that are necessary is like, you really have to believe in what you're doing.
And the mission.
And the mission, because it is more than just, I think, a regular work. It's a lot, and you put a lot into it. You put a lot of yourself into it.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. I don't know. Is there a cool story you can share from your job that you're like, oh man, this was fun, or this was I don't know.
I think I get to meet a lot of cool people.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily mean like, I do get to meet like a lot of important people. Yeah. Right. A lot of people that I don't realize I wouldn't normally in any other path, unless I worked in that industry. Yeah. I wouldn't meet this individual.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. I wouldn't meet this person. Yeah. But you get to meet them, and then you get to kind of tell them what you're doing and who you are. Yeah. And then sort of watch them. It's kind of like what you were saying about in kindergarten, right? You get to tell the story of whatever you do. Yeah. And they'll either hear you and be like, that's great, or you'll see the light bulb turn on. Yeah. Where they're just like, this is important. Yeah. And that's a really cool thing. But I also think when I say I get to meet a lot of cool people, it's like, not just like important high level people, which I do. And this is really cool. But I also get to meet a lot of people that have really cool stories. Yeah. Or they come from places where you're just like, man, that's awesome. Like, that is such a great thing. Like, I grew up, or not grew up, in my work, like we serve a lot of underserved schools. Mm-hmm. And some of the people that come to work with us as volunteers come from those schools, right? Yeah. And so they're like, yeah, when I was in school, when I was in middle school, like, I remember y'all being here and y'all would tutor me. Cool. And now I'm here, and now I get to do it. Right. Yeah. And you're just like, man. And then they tell you that, like, we hear stories of people who are, first generation students. Yeah. Or, some of these people that you talk to, they literally go to school and then they get on the bus and they go right to the, homeless shelter, and then that's where they live. Yeah. And you're just like, you kind of meet these people that are just like working and pushing through life,
Yeah.
and are by, a real definition, are being very successful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But their story might not get heard, might not get seen.
Yeah.
And so you get to meet people that you're just like, man, you have a really great story,
Just
and it
inspired
deserves
by
to be
them.
told,
Yeah.
right? You don't have a position where
Yeah.
your story is already automatically being told.
Yeah.
And so I get to be the one
Yeah.
in what we do to say, you know what, we have this event, or we have this platform,
Yeah.
right? Could be social media, it could be whatever, but we have this platform to tell your story.
Yeah.
So can we
Very
tell
cool.
your story,
I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stories like that out there. Of just, normal, whatever that means, people, just everyday people that you hear where they came from, what they struggled through. And yeah, it's just very inspirational. I think my dad, my parents, eventually I want to find a way to tell their story of immigrating from Mexico and just the struggle that it was, for us. And now their children and the things that we've been able to accomplish because of their struggle, right? And yeah, I mean, everything that I have is because my parents made the difficult choice I'm going to come from Mexico to a country I don't know the language. I don't know where I'm going to work. Moving from my old house to this house was like a task to me. I couldn't imagine like going to a different country. I don't know the language.
Yeah.
I don't have skills to like what do I offer, right?
Yeah.
So, and they've built quite a life for themselves, and their children and now their grandchildren are reaping that. And yeah, like you said, like the stories, just me and my siblings know that story. But I'm sure it would inspire a lot of people. Yeah, and then there was people like your organization that helped along the way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's great what you do.
It's powerful.
Yeah, that's good, man. So very cool. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. Is there any ending thoughts you want to share?
No, I mean, I think we talked about it. If nonprofit work is what you want to do, it's like where people's heart is. Usually people get into nonprofit work not because they're like, I want to work in nonprofit. What am I passionate about?
Yeah.
It's actually the other way around. They're like, I'm really passionate about this. And so I want to
I
find
wanna
a place
find
where I
an
can
avenue.
do that.
Yeah.
Because
Very
that's
cool.
usually, the things that people are passionate about and that end up in nonprofit work. Like they're not going to find that in the private sector.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They might be passionate about, like I said, maybe like political advocacy,
Yeah.
and they want to about immigration.
Yeah.
And they want to, it's like, I really, they might have a story like yours, and they're like, I know my dad's story.
Yeah.
I want to advocate for immigrants in this country, and I want to do it on a political level. Well, that's like super like targeted, right?
Yeah.
But there's a nonprofit out there that's doing that work.
Yeah.
And so that's how a lot of people find it. And so if there's something that you're
Very
passionate about, I would say that for people that, if they're coming out of college, or even if you're in like school still, like if there's something that you're really passionate about that you just can't see a corporate or private place where that fits, then I would say explore the nonprofit world, because there's probably somebody out there doing it. It might be a big one. They might be super tiny with like 5 people, but they're like working hard to do the work, and you can get into that space and start doing that work that you really believe in.
And I like how you said that nonprofit isn't just about passionate people just out there trying to love people, right? It's professionals doing professional work.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a mission in mind, right? It's mission driven. Yeah. But again, it takes accountants and HR and marketing, and it takes all kinds of professionals to drive that.
Yeah, we do the work that we do, and we can tell those stories, and it's still great. But our organization, we still have to, we still got people that are doing benefits meetings with us, having payroll talks, and talking about HR, and but they love it. Like they
Yeah.
love what they do and they're really good at it. And,
Yeah.
where they might be really good at finance and they're like, I don't really want to work for a company. I want to do
Yeah.
something better.
Yeah.
But I'm just a finance guy. I'm like, I'm just
Yeah.
an accountant. And I just feel like all I do is numbers. Well, you know what? You can still do those numbers and you can still,
Yeah.
but it can be towards something that
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, that feels more like
Yeah.
in my little part, I'm helping that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's not just like, oh, passionate people that are out there
Yeah.
like picketing and are making things and out there, digging,
Yeah.
building playgrounds and stuff. Like there are business people and HR people, finance, marketing,
Yeah.
communications, like
Yeah.
all that's necessary.
That's good.
IT, yeah, we got IT guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
That's
have the
good.
guys that have to, tell you how to, when to download certain programs and give you
Yeah.
access to certain things that we do,
Hmm.
and all that stuff. It all
Yeah.
matters.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to end with this. It's not really a story. I was at an inspection today, and the agent showed up. Um, and she goes, "Hey, my brother, he doesn't really know what he wants to do. I mentioned to him about inspections, and he goes, I've invited him to come with me at, to work to kind of see what I do as a real estate agent." He goes, "But I also mentioned inspecting," and he kind of was curious about inspecting. And I told her, "Yeah, he can come, and he can come and kind of be my apprentice for the day if he
Hmm.
wants." He's 16. He's gonna graduate high school next year. And I'm like, "Yeah, if he wants to follow me around for the day, like I'll show him what I do as an
Yeah.
inspector. And like I don't mind sharing." Um, and then I told her about this channel. And I said, "Actually, I have a channel where I just interview different professions." I go, "It may be more beneficial for him to, like, obviously he can come with me, but also like to just listen to all the professionals that I have and I interview and what they do and how they got into it." Um, and so this is for people like that, for her little
Hmm.
brother. This is kind of why I started this channel, for people that don't know what they want to do, or maybe they do know what they want to do. Like my daughter that wants to do radiology, but she's like, how do I become a
Yeah.
radiologist, right? And so this is kind of why. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
your experience. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, expertise, all of it. Um, and so it's another episode in the books. Again, this is My Line of Work. My name is Luis Chavez. I want to thank Michael Mancha for sharing all his expertise and knowledge in the nonprofit sector. If there's anyone out there that you want to recommend, if there is a job, an occupation that you say, "Hey, I'm curious about this occupation," you know, submit it in the comments or send me a DM or however you want to reach out, and I will look for that occupation and potentially interview them so that you can know a pathway to that career or kind of a day to day what those people do. And so thanks for listening, and we hope you have a good